After entering a monster-filled palace, he took over her body, cursed her brother. When she refused to take the medicine, Claude said, "Don't you want to be closer to me? Someone you love?" So, Ray drank the medicine and said, "No, I want to be closer to Claude." As if she knew and was saying, "Does this mean that Claude wishes to make me?" And here, on another day when Claude woke up, he started saying to himself, "Forever." A magical and beautiful word, and it can be used to describe the state of one's feelings towards another or the state of their pure beauty. Everyone dreams of forever at some point in their lives. As for me, I risked my life for eternity, and instead of turning into a corruptible mass buried under the soil, I wanted to achieve eternity, even if I became a demon. And here he looked at Ray, who was asleep, and said, "And now, just when the days were starting to feel sluggish and repetitive, you appeared suddenly, and I felt as if eternal life was unimportant." So he smiled and said, "It pales in comparison to Ray, who taught me what love is." Then he got up and got dressed, continuing to say, "However, do you think the same way I do? Everything is still new to her, but give her 3 years, and she'll start thinking rational questions, like why can't she leave this place? Why hasn't anyone come to look for her? How long will she have to endure this prison-like life? But if she has a child, childbirth will be the least of our worries. Can we live a life as ordinary parents? Surely Ray will say she understands. She's kind and lonely. She might be able to bear it for a decade, or maybe she'll hide her true feelings for the rest of her life, out of pity for the monster she lives with." Then he put his hand in his pocket and took out the bottle of medicine he gives to Ray, saying, "Either way, it all comes down to my jealousy. We don't need a child. We don't need anyone else." He watched her as she finished her sentence and said, "If there is no way to keep Ray by my side forever, then you will spend your life forever with me. The more I corrupt you, the more you attract me. I love that she lets me drag her down with me even though she knows everything. And I love when she cries as if she doesn't know what to do without me. More. I need more. I need her to be so delusional that she doesn't realize she's living in a living hell. But I'll be there with her. Forever." And here the scene changes, and Ray is sweating profusely. Fangs like those of a vampire are clearly visible on her, and she is shocked by this. She starts running, unable to believe what is happening, and says, "No, Claudin wouldn't do something like this to me. He said he loved me. He said he wouldn't hurt me. I need to talk to him." But suddenly someone says to her, "That won't do any good." And when she turns to the voice, she finds it is Claudin, but he is small. So, in astonishment, she says, "Claudin." And here he gave her his hand and said, "Come with me, Ray. I want to show you something." And he took her hand and led her along. She followed him silently, while the little Claudin said, "Don't look back. Just keep walking." And here Ray looked at him in tension when he said, "There's not much time, Ray. It's okay." Then he opened a magical portal and continued to say, "Just trust me." And here Ray was staring in astonishment at the portal that opened and walked out with Claudin, saying in astonishment, "I don't know." And when she looked around, she found a little girl. And suddenly this girl turned to her and said, crying, "He's destroyed everything." And here Ray felt a sense of astonishment when she saw her, because it became clear that it was her younger self. But little Claudin said, "No, that's not you. She is imitating you through your memories." And Ray looked at the little girl and said, "This isn't me? When did he ever seem so clear to me?" Then she looked at the doll in her hand and said, "My grandfather gave me this bunny doll. And when Heis's lion doll was destroyed, he cut off my bunny's ear to make things equal. I'm sure of it." This and here. When he looked at her as a little girl and she was crying, he extended his hand to her. But suddenly there were hands that stopped her from speaking. And suddenly, little Ray's fangs appeared, and she started smiling at her and said, Of course. You will be with Claudine forever. But little Claudine went to try to grab her, calling her name, and here little Ray was the one holding her, telling her, "You must not leave Claudine. He is all I have." And here Ray looked at her crying, and the little girl continued to say, "I will love Claudine forever." While little Claudine started yelling at her name, Ray. Then he put his hand on her face and said, "You must not forget, Ray." Then he wiped her tears away and said, "You will forget me for a short time, but I need you to remember how you got here and where you came from." And here they moved away from each other and little Claudine was alone. He said, "This is the only way we can be reunited." But Ray said, "This is not what I wanted." Then she started saying, "Claudine, will I be trapped here forever? Will I become just like them? Will I be stuck here?" But she remembered Claudine's face as he said to her, "I love you." So she tried to escape from the hands that were holding her, saying, "I don't want to. I have to go back to Claudine. No, leave me alone. He will notice my disappearance and worry. I have to hurry back." But when the hand tried to grab her again, she screamed and woke up from the dream, saying, "No!" But this dream was telling her the truth about what she would become because of Claudine. And here she started crying out of fear, looking around the room and saying, "Isn't this?" And here Claudine said, "Ray, are you okay?" And when she looked at him, he wiped her tears away and said, "You must have had a nightmare." But the truth is that he was the cause of what she was going through. And he asked her, "What was this dream, huh? What's making you cry like this?" And here Ray got up and Claudine said, "What happened, Ray?" And here Ray told him, "Claudine, I'm not hungry anymore." And here the scene changes to the servant Philip, who started saying to himself, "Look at the state of this place. No one is left here who is considered normal. It's been a month since the two of them went to the annex, and they haven't shown up again. And the order of operation on the estate has become chaos, and the gardener is locked in his room, and Jack does nothing all day but wander around. And Mary, who was especially devoted to Lady Ray, seems lifeless these days, and the flowers have wilted without the gardener's touch, and the dirty dishes are rotting without Mary to take care of them. And I personally feed the horses because there is no one else. And I tried to visit the annex, but no one can get past the gates." So he remembered Hayes's words when he told him, "Do you still think the master cares about us? You need to wake up. The best thing for us is to find a way to survive here." And here Philip said, his head bowed in frustration and sadness, like a dog abandoned by its owner. But he was suddenly startled when he heard someone's voice say to him, "Excuse me." So he raised his head quickly, saying to himself in tension, "I don't recognize the voice, a stranger." And here he heard the voice of this person again, saying, "Is there no one home? Please open the door." So Philip went to him and said, "Who's there?" So this person turned to him and looked at him happily and said, "Do you live on this estate, sir? What a relief. My name is Thomas, and I'm not a trespasser or anything. I'm a doctor. I was collecting herbs in the nearby woods and got lost. I also managed to slip into a puddle, and I seem to have sprained my ankle. May I ask for a night's lodging?" But Philip left, saying, "We don't accept strangers. Find your way home." And here Thomas started yelling at him, saying, "Sir, please, it's too dark outside to wander around. I won't be able to go far. Please." And here, when Philip looked at him, he remembered Ray. So he said to him, "Once you recover, you will get out of here." And here Thomas said happily, "Yes, yes, of course I am truly grateful." And here Philip opened the gate for him and said to himself, "Mr. Claudine is not around. It shouldn't hurt." And here Thomas started saying as he walked behind Philip, looking at the mansion, "It's been 3 days already since I stumbled upon this curious estate. There is a sparkling chandelier hanging from the high ceiling, and many other precious pieces adorn the place. The grandeur is enough to shock anyone, and it is clear that this person is very wealthy. But the most interesting part is the people who live here. And here he said to Philip, "Good morning, where are you going?" And Philip, "That's none of your business." So Thomas said to himself in tension, "Always the same answer, no matter what I ask. And I've come to the impression that these people don't like having visitors." Then he remembered what had happened to him and continued, saying to himself, "I didn't have any money for the pharmacy, so I was searching the forest for some herbs. And the local villagers told me some scary stories about this place, but I didn't pay them any attention. A cursed forest that is said to swallow anyone who enters it? How could that be more terrifying than a reality where people die of disease? And the rain made the weather even colder. And it seemed like I couldn't find a way out. And just when I was about to give up to my fate as a dinner for wild beasts, I found an estate in the middle of the cursed forest. And it's rare to find a place where doctors are treated with such disdain in this day and age. But at least I'm alive, and all my limbs are intact." So he smiled at Philip and said, "Shall I make us dinner tonight? I can cook an irresistible soup, you know." But Philip looked at him sharply and said, "Don't worry about that. What about your ankle?" And suddenly, Thomas grabbed his ankle in pain and said, "I think I've sprained it badly. It's still hurting." Then he smiled at him nervously and said, "It's taking longer than usual to heal." And at the same time he was saying to himself, "A bold lie. I may never have another chance to visit a place like this. It's an opportunity for me to discover if there's any truth to the locals' rumors. I could become a hero when they find out I visited this place and came back alive." And here Philip turned the other way and continued on his way, saying, "Fine. Just know that you can't stay long." And here Thomas said to himself in tension, "It won't be easy, but I can't give up now. I can be stubborn when I want to be." And suddenly, when he saw Hayes, he said, "Ah, hello there." And Hayes said, "We meet again." And Thomas smiled at him and said, "I heard that your name is John, is that right? Do you have a minute?" And at the same time he was saying to himself, dealing with him might be easier than dealing with Philip. And Hayes said in surprise, "A minute? With me?" So Thomas said to him, "You see, I'm very interested in this place, as well as the people who live here, and I was wondering if you would tell me more about it." But Hayes held his head and said, "Oh God, I don't know either. Everything's been a mess since I got here. I was handsome, you know, and they ruined my face." And here Thomas said in surprise, "They ruined your face?" And Hayes, "Yes, that wretched man did this to me, and I will never be able to get out of here." And here Thomas thought for a moment, and then shocked Hayes when he said to him, "I think I can help with that." And Hayes said in shock, "What?" But Thomas continued and said, "I may be having some financial problems at the moment, but I'm actually a doctor specializing in rare diseases. And if you tell me about this place, Jack, I'll do my best to try to cure you." And here Hayes was looking at him in amazement at what he was saying, while Thomas smiled at him. And here the scene changes to Ray eating and Claude saying to her, "What do you say, Ray?" And here Ray looked at him and said, "Claude." And he turned to her and said, "Aren't you hungry?" And Ray, "No, I don't feel like anything either." And here Claude looked at her in silence. So Ray said to him in tension, "Oh, I'm sorry. I've been having strange dreams lately. I think that's why." Then she got up and said, "What if we went for a walk, Claude? I think some fresh air would do me good." But when he didn't answer her, she turned to him and said, "Claude." But he didn't answer her and took a knife from the table. So Ray looked at him in surprise and said, "Claude, what are you doing?" And suddenly Claude cut himself and blood began to flow from his hand. So Ray felt tense about what he did and started screaming his name, "Claude." But Claude said mysteriously, "Ray." Then he turned to her and said with a smile, "Come here." And it is clear that he succeeded in turning her into a monster. Wait for the rest of the chapters.